Okay, so it's Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I'm getting ready to listen to Arlo Guthrie on PBS do a live version of Alice's Restaurant, which would be interesting. He's been doing this for a long time. And I'm sure he hasn't done it live in such a long period of time that he's had to rehearse it and learn it all over again. Um, which is much the same thing that happens to us based when, as this lesson says, we finally begin to listen to the voice for God. When we begin to listen to the voice for God, we understand that the purpose of the world, as we were viewing it and as we were attempting to live in it, is the exact opposite of the purpose that God would have us have and use in our mind to understand what is occurring to us so as to learn how to apply forgiveness to heal ourselves and integrate the certainty of who we are back into our awareness of where we actually were created to be, which is the subject of the conversation in the section of creation. So I choose lesson 328. I choose the second place to gain the first. What seemed to be the second place, what seems to be the second place is first. For all things we perceive are upside down until we listen to the voice for God. Now, I don't know how many of you, and yet I would hope and pray all of you do now, for I am certain everyone will and does someday finally hear the voice for God to show them. I'm thinking it's funny because I'm thinking it was not recently, but a while, less than maybe a month or so ago. I watched a movie on Moses, and it's much that way. It's much that way. In that movie is the blueprint for what occurs to us when we hear the voice for God. Moses, who is accepted by the Pharaoh basically as his number one son, in the face of the fact that the Pharaoh's real son understands that Pharaoh accepting Moses as his son sort of renders him as not quite what he had hoped to be in his father's eyes. Okay, and Moses is doing his best to fulfill his function within the court of the king, which he believes is valuable and has a particular meaning and gives him a station in life. And then one day he hears the voice for God and he realizes, oh no, I'm not here to serve the Pharaoh. I'm here to free my people, to lead my people to freedom. So his life is turned upside down when he finally hears the voice for God. That is much like what happens to each and every one of us, because as this says, it seems that we're here. It seems that we're in the world to gain autonomy by striving to make ourselves distinct and separate from people by elevating ourselves in others' views and becoming more and more independent. And we think as a human being, and this is the thinking that the ego fosters, that that is what freedom is. When all along, what we're really doing is serving the ego for the purpose of separation and digging our own grave deeper and deeper. It takes hearing, listening to God's voice. Not just conceptually thinking you understand what God's voice is because you read a book called The Course of Miracles, but really stilling your mind to the point where, or based on a desire to hear something that can tell you of something that you cannot hear within the range of listening that is preoccupied with what is occurring in the world and thinks that it must attend to what it hears within that conversation in order to survive and in order to be a good human. Okay? This is what it says. Yet all we find is sickness, suffering, and loss and death. Yes. Now we're being called to a new purpose right within the spot where we previously found evidence of the old purpose. Okay? This is not what our Father wills for us, nor is there any second to his will. Okay? There is God's will, and there is God's will only. Not doing God's will puts us in a state of opposition to God's will, which does not exist in reality, but manifests a consciousness of separation, wherein which the projected imagery seems real based on the nature of the power of our mind, and yet is merely a dream of the denial of the truth of who we are. And until there's a desire for a clue, a desire to know something other than what is going on within that closed off ball of consciousness, nothing changes, no matter what the form or how the alteration of the form indicates change. There is no change when everything is in service to the ego and preservation of the dream, rather than seeing it for a different purpose and utilizing it to heal our heart and mind and awaken from the nightmare of separation that we have been enforcing upon ourselves. Now, in that sense, we must choose the second place to gain the first, because striving to be first and stay first keeps us in a constant race dedicated to nothing but avoiding God. When finally, as many people have had this experience, and you can read the story. Jesus is one who's had this experience and went on to fulfill his function because he wanted nothing else than the kingdom, because he could not understand or accept that this world was real any longer. Moses, to the extent that he was capable of, had the same experience. Joseph in the Bible had the same sort of experience. Paul had the same sort of experience. Many people have that's why they call it a conversion experience. You get knocked off the horse you're riding in the domain of the separation, and while you seem to be blind to what the world is saying, you become awakened to what God is saying and asking of you. That's what this is talking about. And since our will this is not our Father's will for us, nor is there any second to his will. To join with his is but to find our own. God's will and my will are one will, because creation is a single whole, perfect, eternal, infinite, outside of which there's nothing, process of intimate interaction of the Father enlivening the Son, and the Son extending the reality of God enlivening him as what creation is. There is no will but yours, and I am glad that nothing I imagine contradicts what you would have me do. Okay? What this is saying is, we have been because of the nature of our belief in the reality of the world of space and time, okay, which is all but the vain imaginings in the mind of the fevered in the fevered mind of the Son of God, who for an instant remembered not to laugh, okay? We think that because we see opposition, because we are in opposition to our reality, we think that the opposition is real. So therefore, we think that something can contradict God's will, and in attempt to, if we think we can contradict God's will, and we think that God's will is what we're meant to do, then we're constantly trying to figure out what God's will is, and suffering from our inability to do it, and our experience of opposition to it, or the resistance, is what the suffering is. Okay? Now, yet, when we come to know of the illusory nature of the entire world of space and time, we finally realize that, as the sentence says, that I am glad that nothing I imagine contradicts what you would have me do, because what I am imagining I am doing in the world of time, in space and time, is merely nothing, having no reality in the kingdom, because of the fact that it is not God's will. It is your will that I be wholly safe, eternally at peace, and happily I share that will with you. It is your will that I be wholly safe and eternally at peace. Isn't that an incredible thing to begin to recognize on Thanksgiving? That God's will for me is whole, complete safety in eternal peace of his loving mind and heart. And I happily share that will, which you, my Father, gave as part of me in my creation. In a sense, we have to stop rushing along our merry way in an attempt to achieve something in space-time based on our belief that it can save us or give us anything whatsoever. We must stop. In that sense, we choose the second place. And in the stopping and the allowance and the leaving open in our mind for something new to dawn upon us, reality can overtake us. And we can then catch up to the wave of creation that we are a whole perfect part of. We can choose the second place to gain the first. We can use the littleness that we're experiencing to remember that there is magnitude available to us. Because the discomfort that we impose upon ourselves through the forced limitation of the littleness is due to the fact that we are not little, we are not powerless, but we are whole, perfect, and eternally powerful in the perfectly creating mind of our Father. So we put pressure on our system through the resistance of the reality that we are part of. And it produces the sickness, pain, suffering that we imagine is being inflicted upon us for a reason that we attempt to escape and control within space and time, never once stopping and turning our mind to finally ask God for us to hear him, and in the hearing of him, the understanding of a whole entirely different purpose dawns upon our mind once again, and we could begin to use what we previously using to demonstrate separation and limitation, we can use the littleness of that as a way of escaping to the magnitude and glory of the creative reality that we are a whole perfect part of.